My ex used my name to open credit cards after I helped raise her kids, so I sued her quietly and left her, crying in court. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and I never imagined my kindness would be weaponized against me. From the outside, I was just another dependable, steady person, quiet, patient, and willing to help anyone in need. I had always taken pride in being financially responsible, never missing a bill or a deadline, and I like to think my reliability made me trustworthy. That trust, I would soon learn, can be the most dangerous thing to give someone. Jenna came into my life at a time when I thought I was helping someone who needed it. She was a single mom, charming in that effortless way that makes you want to protect someone, but clearly struggling to keep her life afloat. Her kids were young, lively, and full of energy, and she leaned on me more than I realized at first. At first, it was small things, helping cover groceries when bills piled up, buying school supplies when they were short, even staying up late to calm them down when they were upset. I never thought twice. I genuinely cared for all of them. I felt like I was building something meaningful, a makeshift family built on trust and mutual support. Even though we had no formal ties, our days blended into a routine I didn't mind. Weekends were full of kid-friendly chaos, playground trips, pizza nights, and homework sessions at the kitchen table. Jenna would often joke, half laughing, "I don't know how you do it. Someone actually has to be the grown-up around here to handle all this money stuff." I laughed along, thinking it was a harmless quip, a little acknowledgement of the work I was quietly doing behind the scenes. Those jokes never struck me as a warning. They were just part of the rhythm of life we'd created. I had no idea, not even a shadow of suspicion, that my reliability, my patience, my willingness to step up that foundation of trust would one day be turned against me. Everything I thought was secure and stable was about to be tested in ways I couldn't even imagine. And that first hint of tension, that offhand comment from Jenna, would soon make sense, but not yet. The next time I saw her, I had no clue the line between kindness and exploitation was already being blurred. I never thought I'd start noticing the little cracks until they were impossible to ignore. At first, it was small things, bills that didn't quite add up, receipts I hadn't seen, a quiet nervousness whenever the topic of money came up. Jenna would smile and reassure me, saying, "Don't worry about it. I've got it handled," and I wanted to believe her. I told myself she was stressed, that being a single mom was overwhelming, and that I was here to help, not to interrogate. Every time I offered to take care of something, she thanked me with that half smile like I was the lifeline she desperately needed. And I bought into it completely week after week. I found myself covering more. Rent one month, school fees the next, random emergencies like a broken washing machine or an unexpected car repair. I started adjusting my own budget, skipping things I wanted just to make sure her kids were comfortable and her bills were paid. And I loved it, in a way. Seeing them happy, seeing Jenna finally relax and breathe, it gave me a strange sense of purpose. But there was also that tiny nagging thought at the back of my mind: why did the bills never quite match up? Why did she get a little defensive if I asked questions? I buried those thoughts quickly. I wanted to trust her. The kids became a bigger part of my life than I ever expected. I picked them up from school, helped with homework, and even coached Little League on weekends. Jenna would sometimes sit back and watch, smiling, occasionally saying things like, "You really are a grown-up at handling this stuff," and I would shrug it off, feeling proud that my efforts mattered. I didn't realize I was laying all the groundwork for her to rely on, not just emotionally, but financially. One evening, I caught a glimpse of her phone while she was texting, just a quick glance, but enough to see her mentioning a payment plan I hadn't agreed to. I hesitated, my stomach twisting, but I said nothing. I wanted to believe it was harmless, a misunderstanding, something I could smooth over later. Little did I know, that was the first real sign that the trust I had given so freely was already being tested, and I had no idea just how far it would be stretched. The feeling of unease lingered like a shadow over dinner that night, but I pushed it down, telling myself I was being paranoid. Until I would see the first real evidence that my generosity was being manipulated, I didn't want to admit it. But by the time a few months had passed, I was beginning to feel stretched thin. I had sacrificed nights out, skipped small vacations, and even postponed some personal goals just to keep Jenna and her kids afloat. At the time, it didn't feel like a sacrifice. It felt like family. I loved being around them, seeing the kids smile when they got something they wanted, hearing Jenna sigh with relief when a bill got paid. But deep down, there was this creeping unease I couldn't shake, a quiet voice whispering that something wasn't right. I started noticing patterns. Whenever I asked about expenses, Jenna would quickly change the subject, laugh it off, or reassure me with a "don't worry. I've got it all under control." Little hints kept appearing, receipts left lying around, extra charges on shared accounts, kids mentioning things I hadn't bought for them. I wanted to trust her, so I brushed it off, blaming my own forgetfulness or assuming she had reasons she didn't need to explain. My focus was on keeping the household running smoothly, keeping the peace, and making sure the kids didn't feel the weight of adult problems. Weekends were a blur of school runs, soccer practices, and late-night homework sessions. I learned to make pancakes in shapes the kids loved, sat through bedtime stories I'd read dozens of times, and even patched up scraped knees with the calm authority of someone who was supposed to be responsible. Jenna would often sit nearby, occasionally giving me a grateful look and whispering, "I don't know what I'd do without you." I wanted to believe it was genuine gratitude. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I felt a shadow of doubt. Then one evening, while helping the kids with a school project, I noticed a letter on the kitchen counter addressed to me, but it wasn't from the bank I expected. My heart skipped a beat. I picked it up cautiously, flipping through the pages, and the first real pang of betrayal hit me. I didn't understand it fully yet, but I knew the line between helping and being used was already starting to blur. I looked up at Jenna, who was humming in the living room, oblivious to the tight knot forming in my chest. I wanted to confront her, to ask the questions that were forming in my mind. But something told me that the truth behind this small envelope would change everything, and I wasn't ready to hear it. I'll never forget the moment I realized just how deep the betrayal ran. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind where the sun streamed lazily through the blinds and everything seemed ordinary. I opened my mailbox and saw a stack of letters with my name on them, official looking and crisp. At first, I assumed it was a mistake, maybe some bank mix-up, or a misdelivered bill, but as I sifted through them, my stomach dropped. Multiple credit card statements, all in my name, all with balances I didn't recognize. My hands shook, the paper cutting into my palm somehow more painfully than it should have. I confronted Jenna immediately. "What is this?" I asked, my voice tight. She looked up from her coffee, startled, and quickly masked it with a nervous laugh. "It's just some payments I had to sort out. I didn't want to worry you," she said, brushing it off as if that excuse could erase the panic in my chest. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You used my name? Without asking me?" I said, my voice rising, shaking with anger. She avoided eye contact, murmuring something about bills and emergencies. The words were hollow. I felt this wave of disbelief and betrayal crash over me. Everything I had done, every late night, every extra shift, every sacrifice, wasn't appreciated. It had been taken for granted, twisted into a tool for her own gain. I paced the kitchen, the kids oblivious to the tension, and tried to make sense of it. How could someone I trusted so deeply, someone I had cared for like family, use me like this? The feeling was suffocating. I spent hours that day retracing every financial move I'd made for her household, every favor I'd done, every moment of patience I'd given. The realization settled heavy on my chest. I had been exploited. And the very foundation of trust I had built, the one thing I thought was unbreakable, it was already crumbling. By evening, I sat alone in my car, staring at the dashboard, wondering how far this went, how much of my life had been quietly manipulated while I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't know yet, but I sensed this was just the beginning. And I had no idea that what I would discover next would completely change how. I saw Gina and how I would respond to her betrayal after the initial shock. I realized I couldn't react impulsively. My anger was boiling under the surface. But I knew confronting Jenna again wouldn't solve anything, not without solid proof and a plan. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, every step measured, every move calculated. For the first time, I began to look at everything I'd done for her and the kids through a new lens. Every favor, every late-night errand, every check I'd written, what if it had all been quietly stacked against me? That night, I sat at my kitchen table. The kids asleep, Jenna curled up on the couch watching TV, blissfully unaware. I opened my laptop and started cataloging every financial transaction I'd made on her behalf. Receipts, emails, bank statements, everything. Each line on the spreadsheets made my stomach churn. I was no longer just a generous guy. I was a man who had been unknowingly building a case against someone I thought I could trust. And with every entry, my resolve hardened. I spoke to a lawyer in secret, careful not to tip Jenna off. Sitting across from her in a small office, explaining the situation in clipped sentences, I felt a strange mix of anxiety and empowerment. We'll need to gather everything financial records, evidence of the children's support, anything showing that these accounts were opened without consent, she said. And I nodded, swallowing hard. It felt surreal, almost like I was planning for a confrontation in a movie, but this was real life, and the betrayal was mine to confront. The next few weeks were painstaking. I kept my calm around Jenna, smiling when she joked about how responsible I was with money, all while quietly building the evidence she had no idea existed. Every interaction was layered, laughing with her kids, dropping them off at school, attending parent-teacher meetings, all while knowing that behind the scenes, I was setting the pieces into place. I would lie awake some nights, heart pounding, imagining the moment I would finally confront her. But I also feared it. What if this ruined everything? The kids, our dynamic, the fragile semblance of peace. Yet deep down, I knew I had no choice. Something had to give. I would make sure it wasn't me who walked away broken. The sense of quiet power was intoxicating, but it also came with the heavy weight of anticipation. I had begun a careful, deliberate process, and little did Jenna know, the storm was already forming right under her nose. The day I stumbled on to the full extent of Jenna's deception is burned into my memory. I was reviewing yet another stack of bank statements, the glow of my laptop casting long shadows across the kitchen counter, when I noticed something that made my stomach drop straight to my feet. There were debts larger than anything I'd seen before taken out in my name, hidden under accounts I didn't even know existed. My mind raced. She hadn't just used my name for small bills or school supplies. She had systematically built a financial web that I had unknowingly been tangled in. I felt a mix of disbelief, anger, and that sinking feeling of betrayal that hits you in waves. How had I been so blind? Every moment I thought I was helping, every penny I sacrificed, every late night comforting her kids, it had all been used against me. I could almost hear her voice in my head, the casual way she'd said, "I don't know how you handle money so well," and for the first time it felt mocking. I realized I wasn't just hurt. I had been manipulated, gaslit, into believing that I was the supportive hero in this story. I took a deep breath and shut my laptop for a moment, staring out the window at the fading sunset. I felt a strange clarity settling in alongside the rage. This wasn't just about money, it was about respect, trust, and the audacity of someone to betray you so casually. I knew I couldn't confront her without the right evidence. It had to be airtight, unassailable. This was no longer just a personal matter, it had become a quiet war. One I needed to win strategically. The next days were a blur of meticulous preparation. I compiled every statement, traced every transaction, and documented every instance where her kids had relied on my support. I spoke with my lawyer again, discussing how to approach this without causing unnecessary attention, but ensuring that justice would be served. Every meeting and every phone call strengthened my resolve. I was no longer just a victim. I was preparing to reclaim control over what she had stolen from me. Yet, despite my growing confidence, a shadow of doubt lingered. Could I really confront this without destroying the fragile bonds I had with the kids? Could I stay composed while exposing her manipulation fully? I didn't know yet, but I felt the first real taste of empowerment, sharp and electrifying, mingling with the ache of betrayal. And I knew one thing for certain. Jenna had no idea what was coming. By this point, I had perfected the art of acting normal around Jenna, and it felt almost like living a double life. On the surface, I was still the dependable guy who handled errands, paid for groceries, and helped the kids with homework. I smiled, joked, and laughed at her little quips about me being too grown up with money, while inside I was quietly building a case she couldn't escape. Every interaction was calculated, every conversation carefully measured. Irony was intoxicating. I was right there, helping her, loving her kids, and yet the power had quietly shifted. Jenna, of course, had no clue. She carried on as usual, blissfully unaware that I was cataloging everything she had done. She would boast to friends about how generous I was, how dependable I seemed, not realizing that every compliment she spoke only strengthened the evidence against her. I watched her, sometimes from the doorway, sometimes across the kitchen table, and felt a mix of anger, disbelief, and a strange sense of satisfaction. The person who had once seemed so charming and helpless now appeared vulnerable in a way she couldn't even perceive. The kids remained my anchor. Even as the tension simmered just beneath the surface, I threw myself into being present for them. I coached soccer, helped with science projects, and listened to endless bedtime stories. Every laugh and every moment of trust with them reminded me why I had fought so hard to remain calm and composed. I had to be strategic any slip. Any hint of my growing resentment could jeopardize everything I was building. One afternoon, I caught a glimpse of her reaction to a small bank notification on her phone. Her face tightened, subtle but unmistakable. For the first time, I sensed a flicker of awareness, like she was starting to notice that something wasn't right, but she didn't understand what. I smiled politely, pretending not to notice, and carried on as if nothing had happened. Deep down, I felt a thrill that I hadn't expected. For the first time, I realized I wasn't helpless. I had a quiet, almost invisible leverage that she would never see coming. But as satisfying as it was, a knot of tension lingered in my stomach. How much longer could I wait before the confrontation? And more importantly, would she ever truly understand just how badly she had underestimated me? The weeks that followed were a tense balancing act, each day a careful performance. I continued my routines, driving the kids to school, making dinners, helping with homework, while behind the scenes, I was methodically building the strongest case possible. Every bank statement, every receipt, every small favor I had covered was logged, time-stamped, and stored. I was meticulous. Any mistake could give Jenna the chance to twist the story in her favor. Yet despite the pressure, there was a strange satisfaction in knowing that the power had quietly shifted. I started noticing little tells from her, subtle cracks in her confidence. She would glance at my laptop a bit too often, as casual questions about bills I was supposedly managing, or pause for a beat too long before answering. Each moment confirmed what I already knew. She had no idea that her actions were being documented, that every manipulation, every hidden debt, was now undeniable evidence. It was almost surreal watching someone so cunning and charming act, completely oblivious to the storm quietly building around them. My lawyer and I discussed strategy, how to approach the case without unnecessary public exposure, but with maximum impact. We ran through scenarios, each one more precise than the last. I felt a mix of anxiety and empowerment. For the first time since discovering the fraud, I felt in control, no longer a victim, but a player carefully setting the stage for justice. The thought of the courtroom of the day she would finally be held accountable made my heart race in anticipation, and yet the weight of it all pressed down on me in private moments. I worried about the kids, about how this would affect their perception of me, of her. I knew they didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire, but the betrayal cut so deep I couldn't stop now. I had to see this through, carefully, quietly, strategically. By the end of one long evening, after the kids were asleep and Jenna was watching TV, I leaned back in my chair and let out a long breath. The evidence was ready, the plan was set, and the moment of reckoning was inevitable. She had no clue, and I savored that quiet, tense anticipation, but a small knot of doubt lingered. Could I maintain my composure when the day finally came? It all came crashing down in a quiet, unexpected moment. I had been keeping my composure flawlessly for months, smiling, joking, helping the kids, but one evening, Jenna cornered me in the kitchen. "Are you hiding something from me?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. I froze for a second, heart hammering as her eyes searched mine. For a fleeting moment, I felt that pang of doubt, the anxiety that maybe I'd underestimated her intuition. But then I realized this was the rock-bottom moment I had been bracing for. The first time she truly suspected something was wrong. I took a deep breath, forcing calm into my voice. "I don't know what you mean," I said softly, keeping my tone neutral. Her frustration bubbled over. "You've been acting different, distant. What's going on?" I felt the tension tighten around my chest, a mix of guilt, fear, and anticipation. I wanted to tell her to come clean, to admit everything, but I held back. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let this moment slip into chaos. As she stormed off to her room, muttering under her breath, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of evidence I had carefully compiled. The betrayal hit harder than ever, not just the financial exploitation, but the realization of how deeply she had manipulated me and how long I had been blind to it. The emotional weight was suffocating, a mix of anger, sorrow, and disbelief. I felt utterly exposed, even though I was the one holding all the cards. I couldn't sleep that night. Every memory of sacrifices, every late night with the kids, every time I had trusted her, played in my mind like a cruel montage. And yet, beneath the exhaustion and hurt, a spark of clarity began to grow. I understood that this rock-bottom moment, as painful as it was necessary. It sharpened my focus, solidified my resolve. By the time the sun rose, I knew I was ready. I would proceed with the plan, but this time emotionally fortified. The quiet war I had been waging was about to reach its climax. Angela had no idea just how close it was. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and faint coffee, the kind of sterile, tense atmosphere that made my stomach churn in anticipation. I sat there, calm on the outside but every nerve alert, watching Jenna fidget across the room. She had no idea how meticulous I had been, how every transaction, every hidden debt, every favor she had twisted into her advantage had been documented and verified. The judge shuffled papers, and I felt the weight of the moment pressing down, a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. When the proceedings began, I calmly presented the evidence. "Your Honor," I said, voice steady, "these accounts were opened and used without my consent. All financial responsibility was fraudulently shifted to me. Despite repeated trust and support I provided to the defendant and her children, I laid out each document, each bank statement, each record of payments I had covered." The courtroom fell silent. Even Jenna's friends in the gallery stared in disbelief. Jenna tried to speak, to charm the court, to gaslight her way out of the situation, but it was futile. Her words stumbled, defensive and shallow, while the facts I presented were airtight. I felt a surge of vindication as the judge glanced through the files, brows raising in unmistakable recognition of the severity. Every carefully documented moment of manipulation and exploitation was laid bare. Undeniable and undeniable. The kids were there, quietly observing. I watched their eyes widen as they realized the truth. I wanted to shield them from the emotional sting, but I also wanted them to see that justice could be served, that the people who hurt you could be held accountable. Every small act of betrayal Jenna had committed was now exposed under the harsh light of the courtroom by the time the judge paused. It was clear which way the verdict would lean. Jenna's confident demeanor faltered. Her hands shook slightly, lips pressed together as she tried to regain composure. I felt a calm, icy satisfaction. The moment of reckoning I had envisioned for months had arrived, and there was no turning back. The silence in the courtroom was deafening, but it was mine to command. Jenna's facade crumbled in a way I never could have imagined. By the time the judge read the verdict, she was visibly trembling, her confident posture replaced by a helpless slump. The court ordered full restitution, the credit accounts cleared, and, most importantly, acknowledged the fraudulent use of my identity. I watched her shoulders sag, her lips quivering as tears welled in her eyes, and a wave of vindication washed over me. She had underestimated me from the beginning. Thought my patience and generosity were weaknesses, but now the tables had turned completely. I stayed composed, almost detached, as the courtroom murmured. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself, and seeing her finally confronted with the consequences of her actions was enough. I can't believe this. She whispered under her breath, her voice breaking. I could see the shame, the fear, and the panic she had never felt while exploiting me. It was surreal, watching someone I had cared for, who had relied on me, reduced to that level of accountability. The kids, thankfully, were shielded from the worst of it. I had made sure to explain that the situation wasn't their fault, that justice was being done, and that they could still trust me. Seeing their faces a mixture of confusion, relief, and or reminded me why I had endured all the months of manipulation and stress. This wasn't just about money or revenge. It was about restoring fairness, dignity, and teaching them that standing up for yourself matters. When the session ended, I walked out quietly, leaving Jenna sitting there, broken and exposed. I didn't linger, didn't turn back to savor the moment. My satisfaction was quiet, deliberate. For the first time in months, I felt free from the burden of her deceit, free from the anxiety of wondering what she might do next. Yet even as I left the courtroom, a part of me reflected on the journey, the trust I had given, the betrayals I endured, and the meticulous patience it took to reclaim control. And in that quiet moment of empowerment, I realized I had learned something far more valuable than revenge. I had learned my own strength. Walking away from the courthouse that day, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. I wasn't just free from Jenna's manipulation, I was free from the self-doubt, the second-guessing, and the constant anxiety that had plagued me since the first fraudulent statement arrived in the mail. The empowerment I felt wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and deeply satisfying. Rebuilding my life didn't happen overnight, but it began immediately. I focused on my own finances, reestablished boundaries I had once blurred, and invested my energy back into the kids in ways that were safe and healthy. I continued to be present in their lives, but now with clarity. My support wasn't something to be exploited. It was a conscious choice, a gift, not a tool for manipulation. Seeing them thrive and know that I had their backs gave me more satisfaction than any restitution ever could. Reflecting on the months of deception and betrayal, I realized how much I had grown. I had learned to recognize manipulation, to hold firm in my boundaries, and to trust my instincts even when my kindness compelled me to see the best in people. Jenna's downfall was a harsh lesson, but it was also a mirror showing me just how strong and patient I had been, and how resilient I could be when pushed to my limits. I didn't gloat or revel in her misery. Justice had been served, and that was enough. There was a strange sense of closure in knowing that the person who had betrayed me so thoroughly had finally faced the consequences. I could finally move forward without resentment, without fear, and with the knowledge that my generosity and patience, once exploited, had ultimately led to my own vindication. As I closed this chapter of my life, I felt lighter, wiser, and unshakably empowered. I had been taken advantage of, yes, but I had also proven that patience, meticulousness, and quiet determination could turn betrayal into strength. And for the first time in years, I smiled, knowing I had reclaimed not just my finances, but my dignity, my peace, and my life.